At 70 years old, Whoopi Goldberg, an EGOT winner, trailblazing comedian, and outspoken icon, should be basking in the glow of her legendary career. But behind the laughter, the applause, and the countless accolades lies a deeply human story, one that many of her fans never saw coming. Once celebrated for breaking barriers in Hollywood, Whoopi's journey has quietly been marked by devastating personal loss, chronic illness, career controversies, and an aching sense of isolation. From the tragic death of her mother and brother to the painful health battles that have forced her off the stage and screen, Whoopi has faced more heartbreak in recent years than many could endure in a lifetime. And while millions still see her as the fearless voice on The View, few realize the toll that decades of fame, criticism, and personal grief have taken on her spirit. What really happened to Whoopi Goldberg? Why did she suddenly vanish from the public eye for months at a time? And what does she now regret the most at 70? This is not just the story of a Hollywood icon. It's the story of a woman who has lost more than she's gained, who has laughed through pain, and who now, in her own words, is preparing for the end. Stay with us as we uncover the heartbreaking truth behind the smile of Whoopi Goldberg. Long before the world knew her as Whoopi Goldberg, she was simply Karen Elaine Johnson, a girl from the rough neighborhoods of Chelsea, New York, who was raised by a single mother and surrounded by adversity. Her early life was marked by poverty, limited opportunities, and a burning desire to escape. It was her mother, Emma, a strong and determined nurse and teacher, who instilled in her the courage to believe she was destined for something greater. Emma worked tirelessly, raising Whoopi and her brother Clyde alone, teaching them that despite the world's judgment, they were enough. That belief stayed with Whoopi as she fought her way through stand-up clubs, audition rooms, and empty theaters. When Hollywood finally came calling, it wasn't just a personal victory. It was a triumph for every black woman who had ever been told she didn't belong. But as her fame grew, so did the weight of her private world. Whoopi was always extremely close to her mother, referring to Emma as her rock, her anchor. They were not just mother and daughter, they were best friends. So when Emma passed away in 2010, it shattered Whoopi in ways that words can't quite capture. At the time, Whoopi was performing in a stage production in London. When the call came that her mother had suffered a severe stroke, she rushed to be by her side. But Emma passed shortly after. The grief was overwhelming. For someone who made a living by speaking, she found herself completely speechless. She admitted later that she didn't know how to function without her. The blow was made worse just a few years later in 2015, when her only brother, Clyde, also passed away suddenly from a brain aneurysm. Whoopi didn't even make a public announcement at first. It was as if the pain had become too much to explain, too heavy to share. With both of her closest family members gone, Whoopi confessed in later interviews that she felt truly alone in the world for the first time in her life. Despite being surrounded by producers, co-hosts, and audiences, she was grieving in silence. She continued to appear daily on The View, but fans began to notice a change. Her once fiery commentary became more subdued. Her famous laugh, once loud and infectious, came less frequently. Her eyes looked tired, and her posture seemed heavier. Still, she pressed on, because that's what professionals do. But deep inside, the joy that once fueled her performances had been replaced by a quiet sadness. And in her own words, it's hard to be funny when your heart is broken. Despite all her accolades, Whoopi rarely speaks about these losses in detail. She prefers to keep her private pain private. But close friends and former colleagues have said that losing Emma and Clyde marked a turning point in her life. It wasn't just that she lost her family. It was that she lost her sense of safety, her emotional foundation, and even her motivation to continue performing. In many ways, Whoopi's public image remained intact, but the woman behind it was slowly unraveling. This chapter in Whoopi's life, though often glossed over by media profiles and interviews, reveals a far more complex, vulnerable version of the comedian we thought we knew, and it would only be the beginning of the tragedies that would follow. In early 2019, the millions of viewers who tuned into The View each morning were suddenly met with an empty chair. Whoopi Goldberg, usually the anchor of the panel with her no-nonsense wit and unmistakable presence, was nowhere to be seen. Days passed, then weeks. No explanation came. Rumors swirled. Had she quit? Was she fired? Was it health-related? The silence was deafening, and fans began to fear the worst. Then, almost a month later, a shocking truth emerged. Whoopi was in the hospital, fighting for her life. She had developed a severe case of pneumonia in both lungs, which quickly escalated into sepsis, a potentially fatal condition that sends the body into a violent, organ-damaging response. According to her own words, she came dangerously close to death. "I came very, very close to leaving this earth," she said in a somber video message when she finally returned. The confident voice was still there, but it was laced with fragility. The humor still flickered, but behind it was a woman who had stared mortality in the face and barely made it back. That health scare marked a dramatic shift in Whoopi's life, physically and emotionally. While she had dealt with minor health issues in the past, this was something else entirely. Her absence and sudden vulnerability revealed just how human she really was. Fans who had always seen her as invincible were now confronted with the painful reality that even legends are not immune to suffering. Her recovery was long, difficult, and not without setbacks. And while she eventually returned to the view, she was never quite the same again. Her energy, her voice, even her ability to move comfortably, everything had been impacted. Only a few years later, in 2021, Whoopi again disappeared from the show, this time due to sciatica, a nerve condition so painful that it left her temporarily using a walker and, at one point, a wheelchair. "I couldn't walk," she admitted bluntly on air. "I was afraid I was never going to walk again." For someone whose career was built on commanding stages, red carpets and sets, this decline in mobility was not just a medical issue, it was an emotional blow. It stripped her of confidence, it made her fearful of her own body, and most of all, it made her think seriously about the years she had left. Even when she returned to the show, her presence was often marred by whispers of concern. Her voice sounded strained. Her body language appeared exhausted, and in moments where she would usually jump in with a biting one-liner or push the panel into deep debate, she sometimes fell silent. The viewers noticed. Social media speculated. But Whoopi, ever the professional, rarely let the public see her fear. Still, those close to her say the health scares changed her. She became more withdrawn, more reflective, and often questioned how long she could keep up the daily pace of live television. And while the cameras only show what happens in the studio, behind the scenes, Whoopi has reportedly been navigating an increasing number of health-related complications. Friends say she's been deeply anxious about her ability to continue working, worried that any sign of weakness could push her out of the industry she once dominated. As she passed the milestone of 70, that anxiety reportedly deepened, becoming a shadow that looms over her daily life. For a woman who spent decades commanding the spotlight, her most recent battles have forced her into the shadows, physically limited, emotionally worn, and deeply aware of her own mortality. But even through pain and illness, she still shows up, still smiles, still jokes. Because for Whoopi Goldberg, resilience has always been part of the job, even when her body begins to betray her. But the question remains, how much longer can she carry the weight? For decades, Whoopi Goldberg was seen as untouchable, a pioneer who defied every Hollywood stereotype, an Oscar-winning actress who stood up for what she believed in, even when the world wasn't ready. But in recent years, that legacy has been tested in ways she never expected. In 2022, a single statement on The View triggered a tidal wave of backlash that threatened to undo everything she had built. During a discussion about a school banning a Holocaust-related book, Whoopi commented that the Holocaust was not about race, suggesting it was about man's inhumanity to man. The fallout was immediate and fierce. Critics called the remarks ignorant, dangerous, and deeply offensive. Social media erupted. Major Jewish organizations condemned the statement, and suddenly, the woman who had once been a beacon of cultural insight found herself cast as the villain. ABC suspended her from The View for 2 weeks, citing the need for reflection and education. But behind the scenes, the damage cut much deeper. Whoopi was devastated. According to close sources, she felt blindsided, misunderstood. She issued a public apology, clarifying that she now understood why her comments were hurtful. But the scars remained. After spending her life fighting for inclusion, equity, and truth, She was now being painted as the very thing she had fought against. And the worst part? She felt powerless to explain herself. The internet had already decided. That moment marked a painful turning point in Whoopi's relationship with fame. She had always been blunt, unfiltered, and unapologetically honest. That was the charm that built her career. But now, in a world where every word is dissected under a microscope, that same honesty had become a liability. The suspension was more than a punishment. It was a public shaming. And it struck at the core of her identity. Whoopi had built her voice on being fearless. Suddenly, fear was everywhere. In the months that followed, fans and critics alike noticed a change. She became more cautious on the view, often hesitating before speaking, choosing her words more carefully than ever before. The spontaneity that once made her magnetic seemed dulled. Those close to her say she wrestled with the idea of leaving the show altogether, fearing that her legacy would be reduced to one controversy, one moment, rather than a lifetime of impact. But walking away wasn't an easy option either. Where would she go? What platform would offer her the freedom she once had? This wasn't the first time Whoopi had faced controversy, but it was the first time she truly felt vulnerable to cancellation. And it wasn't just the media that turned on her. Some longtime fans expressed disappointment, while others demanded her removal from the view altogether. For a woman who had championed difficult conversations and navigated decades of public discourse, the message was clear. The rules had changed. And not even Whoopi Goldberg was immune. Privately, Whoopi has spoken about the emotional toll this chapter has taken. The experience left her questioning whether the world still valued her voice, or if they simply wanted a version of her that no longer existed. At 70, she has become acutely aware of her mortality, not just physically but professionally. "I've been around a long time," she once said, "and I've seen people fall out of favor fast." For the first time, she worried she might be one of them. What made this chapter so heartbreaking wasn't just the backlash. It was the isolation. Despite everything she'd done for entertainment, for representation, for progress, she felt abandoned when she needed support the most. She wasn't asking for a pass. She was asking to be understood. But the world had stopped listening. As Whoopi Goldberg enters her 70s, a time when most would hope to slow down and enjoy the fruits of their labor, she instead finds herself in a period of quiet reckoning. The laughter is still there. The occasional sharp one-liner on The View still draws applause. But behind the stage lights and applause lies a woman who's grown profoundly reflective. She often jokes about death now, not in the way comedians do to make light of the inevitable, but in a way that hints at acceptance. "I'm getting ready to leave," she once said candidly, and though it was couched in humor, there was no mistaking the truth in her eyes. She's thought about it. She's preparing, and more than anything, she doesn't want to leave this world with unfinished words. Despite her fame, Whoopi has admitted she often feels alone. The deaths of her mother and brother left her emotionally untethered. Her daughter, grandchildren, and close friends are a comfort, yes, but even they can't always penetrate the walls she's built to protect herself from grief and disappointment. She's spoken openly about not wanting to remarry, not needing a romantic partner, and choosing solitude as a way of life. But in her rare, vulnerable moments, she's also admitted that being alone can be both empowering and painful. "Sometimes," she whispered in one interview, "it would be nice to just have someone sit with me. Not talk, just sit." She's also begun to reflect more honestly on her career choices, acknowledging that she's made decisions she now questions. Roles she turned down, opportunities she avoided, people she pushed away. The fear of being typecast kept her from accepting roles that could have redefined her career. Her dedication to staying out of the Hollywood machine kept her authentic, yes, but it may have also cost her lasting relationships in the industry. She's never been the type to chase fame, but now she wonders if that distance has left her forgotten in a world that moves on so quickly. More than once, she's confessed that the hardest part of growing older isn't the physical pain, or even the fading spotlight. It's the realization that so many of the people who shaped her life are now gone. Her mentors, her co-stars, her lifelong friends, many of them are no longer here. And she's had to grieve them in silence, without the comfort of being able to retreat into a private life away from the public gaze. As she continues to host The View, day after day, she knows that every segment, every episode, could be one of her last. That awareness lingers behind every word, every glance, every pause. Still, Whoopi hasn't completely given up. There are projects she still wants to do, films she dreams of directing, books she's considered writing. But she's realistic now. The energy she once had has waned. The desire to fight Hollywood's politics is nearly gone. More than anything, she wants peace. She wants to be remembered not just for her career, but for her convictions, for standing up when it was dangerous to do so, for breaking doors open for black women, for making people laugh when they were ready to cry. In the end, Whoopi Goldberg's story is not one of failure. It's one of fierce survival. But survival has a cost, and now, at 70, she carries that cost quietly, behind tired eyes and a soft smile. The tragedy isn't that Whoopi faded away. It's that the world didn't see how much she gave until it was almost too late.